So Chris Paul is having a year. His actual stat line is not amazing. It's like 17, 6, and 5. But when you put everything into account, the defense, the great efficiency, then you have a guy in CP who has proven that he's still got it. I mean, his true shooting is 60%, his assist to turnover stuff is all really good, and he's doing this while playing, about 31 minutes a game, so if we'd pictured him playing like 36, 37 or so, then his numbers would probably be closer to like 20 points, 8, 9 assists, that sort of thing. And Chris Paul has always been a guy who did a lot of things that did not show up in the stat sheet, while also having a pretty damn good stat line. So he's been doing kind of everything for OKC, for a team that is now 22-16. They have been, they've been kind of consistent all year. Like, even as they were 5-10, a lot of their losses were pretty close. So a couple shots here and there go their way, and they could have been looking like this earlier in the season, but they've been winning a lot lately. And I guess there's a few questions to be had. Number one is, can Chris Paul keep this up? Is he not going to look like some slow point guard 30 games from now? I would have to assume that he's going to keep it up. I mean, you look at last year with the Rockets, and okay, the health was a question, but in terms of his actual quality of play and how good he was when Harden wasn't on the floor, it was still all pretty damn all right. And it is an interesting thing to look at the way it ended with Chris Paul and Harden in Houston. And when you think about it, what do we know? We know that Chris Paul wanted the offense to move around more, and there was some friction between CP and Harden, whatever, okay? Here's the thing. Should the Rockets have not listened to Chris Paul? I know it's a wild idea, but maybe Daryl Morey and James Harden and D'Antoni and just that whole infrastructure should have been like, you know what? I know we have the best system from an analytical standpoint, but this is not a computer simulation. These are real human beings. And maybe it would make sense to have somebody who's not just going to worship the ground James Harden walks on. Now, before I get too carried away in all that talk, I think I was still okay with the trade, mainly because of Chris Paul's health, and then you'd figure Westbrook could bring some extra dynamic flair to the team or whatever, or he was going to miss a whole bunch of jump shots. It's been a little bit of both. But when we talk about that dynamic stuff, right, the ability to do more than just simply Harden ISO, Harden pick and roll, all that, Chris Paul was the perfect guy to orchestrate that stuff. And again, it seems like that's what he wanted to do. And okay, anyway, if we move on to OKC, because they're the real topic here. So how far can they go? Is this team someone who can be like a real thing in the playoffs? I mean, the CP, Shea, Gallo trio is pretty difficult to defend, and Schroeder is having his most efficient season. Steven Adams, one of the best screen setters, offensive rebounders in the league. However, once you move past Schroeder, there is a bit of an offensive drop-off. Terrence Ferguson has started this whole season. I don't think teams are really fearful of him. He's shooting 24% from 3 in his last 10 games. And then between Diallo, Noel, Baisley, Abdul Nadir, there's just not a lot of guys who can come into this rotation and just make shots, I guess. And I guess that could be something they could look to improve on. I would say that they could also use like a multi-position defender wing dude, but they already traded that in Jeremy Grant, which I'm not really killing them for, because I just think they viewed this team as a kind of a placeholder before this whole thing was restarted. But with how it's going now, I do think OKC could look to rethink some things about this season. Not saying they should be all-in buyers who are moving picks to get guys or anything like that, but let's just look at this, okay? Shea is your young star who is getting better. You have all of these draft picks. Is there really a world in which this team can maintain being pretty good, potentially make a second round, even a conference finals if things really bounce their way, and still have the future set up really well? Potentially. Now the counter to that is, first round exit. You've got a lot of picks, but it would be better off to have your own pick be really high to go along with Shea. So, I don't know. I guess it would depend on the little details. What could you get back for whoever and whatever else? I mean, if we look at OKC's salary situation moving forward, and I realize this is a video that I did not long ago where I was talking about should OKC trade everyone, and then pretty much after that they started winning games. So, you know, they got a lot of money coming up after this season. They got Robertson's money coming off, and I don't even know if Robertson's going to be in the NBA anymore. It seems like his injury is just not recovering at all. You got Shea on this rookie deal until the end of 2022. And Gallo's still the interesting one. I think you could definitely get something for him. I know he's making $22 million, but he's definitely an effective player. And in the case of Chris Paul, even with how good CP is playing this year, I don't really know if you could trade for him. I mean, I think the one would be the T-Wolves, because they need a leader, they need a floor general, they need all that stuff, and they need defense, you know. But they are also, well, they're 1.5 games out of the 8th seed, but I guess it would depend on what you could get Chris Paul for. But I mean, at this point, if OKC wants to move CP, which I don't even know if they want to, they might want to just maintain this thing, but if they were to move him, wouldn't you do it like after this season unless you got some amazing offer at the deadline? Because you could probably ramp up the offers now and get something kind of wild for him. But we'll have to see with all that. One thing we can definitely say is OKC is either as good as last season or better, but now they're 4 first-round picks richer for the Chris Paul trade. So that was a winning move on their part.